The dust rose slow and heavy that morning, hanging in the warm air like it did not want to settle. Folks had gathered early, boots scraping against the dry ground, voices low, eyes curious. Auctions always brought a crowd, but this one felt different. There was a quiet weight in the way people stood, hats pulled a little lower, glances shifting toward the same spot again and again. She stood there beside the fence, hands steady but tight around the rope. The cow beside her was small, gentle-eyed, its coat brushed clean as if it were going somewhere better than this. It was the last thing she had left. Everyone in town knew it, even if no one said it out loud. Life had not been kind to her these past years. The land had dried up, the storms had come too late or too hard, and the man who once stood beside her was now just a memory carried in silence. What remained was a small piece of land, a child who watched everything too closely, and this one cow that had kept them fed longer than anyone expected. The little girl clung to her dress, peeking out at the crowd with wide, uncertain eyes. She did not speak, but her fingers tightened every time someone stepped closer. She understood more than a child should. She knew what it meant to lose something that mattered. Across the yard, men sized up the cow with practiced looks. Some whispered numbers, others shook their heads. To them, it was just another trade, another chance to bargain low and sell high. But for her, this was not business. This was the end of something. Then he stepped forward. He did not rush like the others. His boots moved slow, measured, as if he had all the time in the world. Dust clung to the edges of his coat, and his hat cast a shadow over his face. A cowboy, plain and simple, but there was something in the way he carried himself that made people notice. He looked at the cow first, not her. His eyes moved over it carefully, like he understood more than just its worth in dollars. Then his gaze lifted, meeting hers for a brief moment. It was not a long look, but it was enough to make her grip the rope tighter. The bidding started. Numbers were called out, low at first, testing the ground. She stood still, listening as each offer came and went. None of them felt right. Each one sounded like a piece of her life being priced and passed around. The cowboy stayed quiet. The crowd began to murmur. Some thought he was not interested. Others guessed he was waiting for the right moment. The little girl pressed closer, her eyes now fixed on him, as if she sensed something no one else could. Then, just as the bidding slowed and the auctioneer looked ready to close, his voice cut through the air. It was calm, firm, and higher than the rest. Heads turned. The number he gave was enough to silence the whispers. It was more than anyone expected. More than the cow should have fetched it on any normal day. The auctioneer wasted no time. The hammer came down with a sharp crack that echoed across the yard. It was done. A few people nodded, impressed. Others frowned, wondering why a man would pay that much for so little. But the cowboy did not explain himself. He simply stepped forward, pulling folded bills from his pocket, counting them out without hesitation. She watched him, unsure what to say, unsure what to feel. Relief should have come first, but it did not. Something about the way he acted made her uneasy, like there was more to this than a simple sale. He handed over the money, then reached for the rope. For a moment she did not let go. Their hands brushed, and again their eyes met. This time he did not look away. Then, instead of leading the cow off like anyone expected, he did something that made the entire yard fall silent. He placed the rope gently back into her hands. And before anyone could make sense of it, he spoke again, his voice steady but carrying something deeper beneath it that no one could quite name. That was the moment everything changed, though no one there knew just how much. The yard stayed quiet in a way that did not belong to a place like that. Even the auctioneer seemed to forget his next call. The rope rested back in her hands, rough against her skin, as if it had never left. She stared at him, waiting for some kind of explanation, but he did not rush to give one. "I didn't buy her to take her," he said, his voice low but clear enough for those closest to hear. "I bought her so you wouldn't have to lose her." A murmur spread through the crowd, soft at first, then growing as people leaned toward one another. Some shook their heads, others raised their brows, unsure if they had heard him right. Acts like that did not come easy in a place where every dollar was hard-earned. She swallowed, her grip still firm on the rope. "Then why bid at all?" she asked, her voice steady, though there was a crack beneath it that only someone close might notice. His gaze did not shift. Because they would have taken her from you for less, he replied. And I wasn't about to let that happen. The answer did not settle things. If anything, it stirred more questions than it calmed. She glanced at the money now in the auctioneer's hand, then back at the man standing in front of her. No one gave away that kind of money without reason. Not here, not anywhere. The little girl stepped slightly forward, her small hands still clutching the fabric of the dress. She looked up at the cowboy with a mix of wonder and caution, as if trying to decide whether he was something good or something to be wary of. Children had a way of seeing truth in places grown folks often missed. "Ma," she whispered, her voice barely reaching beyond them. "Why's he doing that?" She did not answer right away. She could not. Because she did not know, the crowd began to thin, but not quickly. People lingered, pretending to check other items, though their ears stayed turned toward the strange turn of events. A few men cast long looks at the cowboy, measuring him in a different way now. Kindness like that could be mistaken for weakness in a place where survival came first. He reached into his pocket again, slower this time, pulling out nothing more than a worn piece of paper. He looked at it for a second before folding it back and tucking it away. It seemed small, almost unimportant, but something about it made her uneasy. "You're from around here?" she asked, needing something solid to hold on to in this moment that felt anything but steady. He shook his head once. "Passing through?" That made even less sense. A man just passing through did not spend money he would not get back. A man just passing through did not stop to fix problems that were not his. "Then you should have kept your money," she said, a little sharper now, not out of anger but out of confusion she could not hide. "We would have managed." He gave a faint smile, though it did not quite reach his eyes. "From what I've seen, you've been managing alone for too long." The words landed heavier than he might have meant them to. She straightened slightly, pride rising up to meet whatever pity might have been there. She had carried her weight without asking for help. She had done what needed to be done. "I didn't ask for saving," she replied. "I know," he said. "That's why I didn't ask if you wanted it." That answer should have upset her more than it did. Instead, it left her quiet, unsure how to respond. There was no arrogance in his tone, only a kind of certainty that made it hard to argue against. The little girl looked between them, her eyes moving from one face to the other. "Are you staying?" she asked suddenly, the question simple but carrying more meaning than it seemed. The cowboy hesitated, just for a moment. It was the first time he looked unsure. "I wasn't planning to," he admitted. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of dust and dry grass across the yard. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaked and a horse stamped its hoof. Life moved on around them, but right there, everything felt held in place. She adjusted her hold on the rope, the cow shifting slightly beside her, calm despite it all. "Then why does it feel like you're not telling the whole truth?" she asked, her voice quieter now, but more direct than before. He met her eyes again, and this time there was something different in his expression. Something heavier. Because the truth was, he had not come there by accident. And whatever had brought him to that dusty yard was not finished yet. He did not answer her question right away, and that silence said more than any words could. It stretched between them, heavy and uneasy, like the air before a storm. Around them, the last of the crowd began to drift off, though a few still lingered near the fence, watching with quiet interest. "I came looking for something," he finally said, his voice lower now, meant only for her. "Didn't expect to find it here." She frowned slightly, the lines of worry deepening on her face. "And what is that supposed to mean?" He glanced past her, toward the open land beyond the yard. Fields that had once been green now carried the dull color of dry seasons and hard years. A place that had seen better days, just like the people trying to hold on to it. "Means this town's not as quiet as it looks," he replied. That did not sit well with her. Nothing about this morning had gone the way she expected, and now this stranger was speaking in half-answers like he knew more than he should. She shifted her stance, placing herself just slightly in front of the child without thinking. "We don't have trouble here," she said, though her voice lacked the certainty she wanted it to carry. A faint look passed over his face, something between doubt and understanding. "Trouble doesn't always show itself right away," he said. Sometimes it waits until folks are too worn down to fight back. The words struck closer than she wanted to admit. The past few years had taken more than crops and cattle. They had taken strength, hope, and the will to keep pushing without question. She had felt that weight every single day. Before she could respond, a man stepped closer from the edge of the yard. He was older, broad-shouldered, with a face that carried more authority than kindness. He had been watching for a while now. "That was quite a show," the man said, his tone flat but edged with something sharper beneath. His eyes moved from the cowboy to the rope still in her hand. "Didn't know we were handing out charity today." The cowboy turned slightly, his posture calm but alert. "Wasn't charity," he said. "Just making sure a fair deal stayed fair?" The man gave a dry chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "Fair's got a different meaning depending on who's speaking." She recognized that tone. It was the kind that came from someone used to getting their way, especially when others had no choice but to give in. Her grip on the rope tightened again. "We had an agreement," she said, facing the older man now. "The cow was to be sold at auction." "That's what happened." He looked at her, then back at the cowboy. "And yet here she stands with it still in her hands. Doesn't look like a sale to me." A few more people slowed their steps, drawn back by the rising tension. The little girl pressed closer again, her small fingers curling into the fabric at her side. The cowboy took a step forward, placing himself just enough between them to shift the balance. "Money was paid," he said. "That's all that matters." "Maybe to you," the man replied. "But around here, we keep things simple. Ownership changes when the deal is done." "No take-backs? That your rule?" the cowboy asked. "It's how things stay in order." There it was. Not law, not fairness, control. She felt it settle in her chest, that familiar sense of being cornered by something bigger than herself. The auction had been her last choice, not her first. And now even that seemed like it might be slipping into something else. "You already got your share," she said, her voice firmer now. "There's nothing more to take." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "That depends." On what, he did not say. He did not need to. The cowboy's expression hardened just enough to be noticed. "Sounds like you're asking for trouble." The man held his gaze. "No, I'm saying it's already here." The wind picked up again, brushing dust across the ground between them. It felt like the whole yard was holding its breath, waiting to see which way this would turn. She looked from one man to the other, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was no longer about a cow. It was about something deeper, something tied to the land, to the people, to whatever quiet struggle had been building long before today. And now, somehow, she was standing right in the middle of it. The air felt tighter with every passing second, like the ground itself knew something was about to break. No one moved. Even the few folks still standing nearby kept their distance now, watching in silence as if stepping closer might pull them into something they could not escape. She kept her hold on the rope, though her hands had started to tremble. The cow shifted again, sensing the unease, its calm nature beginning to fade. The little girl leaned into her side, eyes wide, not fully understanding what was happening, but feeling the weight of it all the same. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. The older man did not answer right away. He looked past her again, out toward the land, as if everything out there belonged to him in ways no paper could prove but everyone still believed. When he spoke, his tone was quieter, but it carried more than before. "This land's been changing hands," he said. "Slowly, piece by piece. Folks fall behind, they sell what they can and what they can't. Well, that gets settled another way." A cold feeling ran through her. She had heard whispers of it late at night when neighbors spoke in low voices. Families leaving without much warning. Farms standing empty by the next season. She had told herself it had nothing to do with her, that she could hold on if she just worked harder. "You already took enough?" she said. "We paid what was owed. For now," he replied. The meaning hit harder than anything he had said before. This was not about today. It was about tomorrow and the day after that and every day that followed. It was a line that kept moving, one she would never be able to catch. The cowboy shifted his stance, his presence firmer now. "That's not how a fair deal works," he said. The man gave him a long look. "You keep using that word like it means something out here." "It does," the cowboy answered. Just not to the right people. The tension between them sharpened like a wire pulled too tight. For a moment, it felt like one wrong word would snap it. She looked at the cowboy again, searching his face for something she could trust. He had stepped into this without hesitation, spoken when others stayed quiet. But she still did not know why. People did not risk things like this for strangers. "You said you were passing through," she said, her voice softer now but filled with urgency. "Then why are you standing here like this matters to you?" He did not look away. "Because I've seen what happens when no one does." There was something in that answer, something worn and real, like it came from a place he could not leave behind. It made her chest tighten, not from fear this time, but from the sense that this moment was bigger than just her and her struggle. The little girl tugged gently at her sleeve. "Ma," she whispered, "are we going to lose her again?" She swallowed hard, her eyes dropping to the child for just a second. "Not if I can help it," she said, though she did not know how she would keep that promise. The older man stepped closer now, closing the space between them. "You can't hold on forever," he said. "Sooner or later, everything comes due." The cowboy moved just enough to block his path, not aggressive but firm. "Not today," the man stopped, his gaze shifting between them. "You think one act like this changes anything?" he asked. "You think giving back a cow fixes what's already in motion?" "No," the cowboy said, "but it's a start, a start." The words hung in the air, simple but heavy with meaning. The wind picked up again, stronger this time, carrying dust across the yard and into the open street beyond. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed, and a horse let out a sharp sound, restless and uneasy. More people had stopped now, drawn back by the rising tension. They stood in small groups, watching, waiting. No one spoke, but the silence itself felt louder than anything else. She could feel it building, that moment where everything would shift one way or another. Her heart pounded, her thoughts racing through every possible outcome, none of them clear. Then the older man took a slow breath and reached into his coat. The movement was small, but it changed everything. The cowboy's eyes narrowed, his stance tightening. She felt the child press closer, fear now clear and real. Whatever came next would decide more than just the fate of a single cow. It would decide who held power here and who was willing to stand against it. And as his hand disappeared inside that coat, the whole yard seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment that could not be taken back. For a second, no one moved. The man's hand stayed inside his coat, and every eye in the yard fixed on that single motion. The air felt thin, like it might snap if anyone breathed too hard. Then he pulled something out. Not a weapon, not a threat, but a folded stack of papers, worn at the edges and marked with ink that had seen better days. He held them up just enough for the cowboy to see, a faint, knowing look crossing his face. "Everything comes due," he repeated, tapping the papers lightly. "These say so." The cowboy did not flinch, but his eyes sharpened. "Papers don't make things right," he said. "They just make them look that way." The man gave a short nod, as if he expected that answer. "Maybe, but they still hold weight. This land, these debts, they all tie together. She's behind. That means it's mine to claim." A ripple moved through the small crowd again. Folks had seen this before, though maybe not this close, not this personal. A bad season turned into a missed payment into a claim. It was a slow way of taking everything without ever raising a hand. She felt her chest tighten, but this time something else rose with it, not just fear. Something steadier. "I signed what I had to," she said, stepping forward before she could second-guess herself. "But I never agreed to be pushed off what's mine without a fight." The man looked at her, surprised for the first time. "Fight?" he echoed. "With what?" Before she could answer, the cowboy reached into his own coat and pulled out that same worn piece of paper he had looked at earlier. He unfolded it carefully, holding it out. "With this," he said. The older man's eyes narrowed as he took it. He scanned the page once, then again, slower this time. The confidence in his face began to shift, not gone but shaken. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "From someone who lost more than they should have," the cowboy replied. "Same way you've been collecting these lands. Only difference is this one shows the full agreement, not just the part that favors you." The man's jaw tightened. Around them, people leaned in just a little more, sensing the change. The paper passed back into the cowboy's hand, but the balance in the yard had already begun to tilt. "You're saying those claims aren't clean," the cowboy went on, "that they were pushed through when folks had no choice. That means they can be challenged." A low murmur spread again, but this time it carried something different. Not fear, hope, small but growing. The older man glanced around, seeing the shift in the crowd. For the first time, he was not the only one holding something over everyone else. He adjusted his coat, his voice losing some of its edge. "This isn't over," he said. "No," the cowboy agreed. "But it's not yours either." There was a long pause. Then, without another word, the man turned and walked away, his steps slower than before. No one followed him. No one spoke to him. The space he left behind felt lighter. The yard stayed quiet for a moment longer, as if everyone needed time to understand what had just happened. Then voices slowly returned, softer now, filled with questions and something close to relief. She stood there, still holding the rope, the cow calm once more at her side. The little girl looked up at her, then at the cowboy. "Does that mean we get to keep her?" she asked. She looked down at the child, then back at the man who had stepped in when no one else did. "Yes," she said gently. "We do." The girl smiled, a small, bright thing that seemed to cut through all the tension that had filled the morning. She turned to the cowboy, her expression more open now, though still searching. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "I know," he replied. "But some things are worth standing for." She nodded slowly, understanding more than she could put into words. "And the proposal?" she asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice now. He took a breath, not looking away this time. "Stay," he said, "not just today. Help rebuild what's been worn down? You won't have to do it alone anymore." The offer hung there, simple but full of meaning. It was not just about land or cattle. It was about a different kind of future. She looked out at the fields, then at the people slowly returning to their lives, and finally at the man standing in front of her. For the first time in a long while, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. "We'll see," she said, though there was a softness in her voice that had not been there before. The wind moved through the yard again, but it no longer felt heavy. The dust settled, the tension eased, and somewhere deep down, something new had taken root. Sometimes all it took was one moment, one choice, to change the course of everything. Thanks for watching this story. Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Tell me in the comments what you felt about this story and what kind of stories you want to see next. See you in the next story.